morning, everyone. Good morning. You all had fun last night? Yes. All waking up? Waking up? Yes. Right. Yes. We all had fun. So the theme of our last keynote presentation today is the power of hashtag moments. To many of you sitting here at this moment, the last day of the event, I'm sure there will be mixed feelings. Maybe a bit sad to have to say goodbye to many of your good friends, but at the same time, happy to have met some new friends sharing the similar passion, and soon having the time to explore Hong Kong, a vibrant city. To me, at this moment, being the baby one standing in front of all you experts, I truly feel humbled and inspired to be able to join this insightful event for the first time, and have the privilege to be part of the team to make this happen. I want to truly thank you all for being such a wonderful gang. I can truly feel the passion, the friendship, the warmth, and the fun. Thank you to Tina Jeunesse for her dedication in the last 13 years to make this all happen. Right. Back to this moment. Thank you, Tina. I need to get the time back to lovely Lisa Wang from Twitter. She is going to deliver the presentation on behalf of Frederique Covington, who unfortunately cannot join us due to some urgent business needs. Lisa, we're really happy that you can join us, and we really appreciate that. She only flew in around midnight last night, and she wasn't feeling too well before as well. So let's put our hands together for Lisa from Twitter.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm here from Twitter. I work in our Singapore office. I actually only recently relocated there in January. Prior to that, I was in our San Francisco headquarters for about 3 years. So really excited to be here in Asia and really excited to speak to you all today. I've actually been following this hashtag on Twitter, and it seems like there have been a lot of great discussions this week. Not a lot of tweets, but maybe we'll change your mind after this presentation. But just a bit about myself. I was actually born in China. My folks are Chinese and grew up in Canada and the US. So it's particularly exciting for me to be back in Asia and working here and seeing Twitter grow our business here. I'm on our emerging markets team, which takes care of APAC, Latin America, Middle East, North Africa, and other emerging markets. So it's a pretty wide range. Yeah, really excited to talk to you guys. So, as Tina kindly introduced, I'm going to be talking today about real-time marketing and how that relates to moments. Talking about what do we mean when we talk about moments, what are the opportunities that those moments present to marketers, to corporations, and to brands, and how brands can take advantage of those. I think there's a lot of apprehension around the term real-time marketing because it can be very unpredictable. You're dealing with things that you don't necessarily have a lot of visibility into before the fact. And one thing that I'd like to call out is, the title of the presentation is deliberately planned for the moment, because one thing we see in the brands and the marketers who do real-time marketing really successfully is that they actually are able to plan for it in advance. So I'll share with you today a framework which will hopefully dispel some of the myths around how difficult this is or how many resources it requires. It really just requires a little bit of creativity and some ingenuity. So I'll be talking through some of those examples today. But before getting into how brands are using Twitter, I'd just like to start off with a little bit of information about how people in general are using Twitter and what Twitter's role in the world is, as well as how Twitter is shaping how some of the information that we consume every day is shared and consumed. So when we talk about moments, we often think about some of the most important moments in history. So for example, man first walking on the moon, or a lone protester standing up to a tank in Tiananmen Square, or the inauguration of Pope Benedict XVI just 8 years ago. And these are obviously big moments in history, but when you look at these photos, I'd like to ask you to think about how you first heard about these moments, where you were, how you received that information. And one thing that they have in common is that all of these moments were first interpreted by journalists, by traditional media. They were delivered to us by journalists and traditional media, and we were passive recipients of that information. It was other people who were telling us that these moments were important, what they were supposed to mean to us, and again, how we should interpret them. So fast forward to the 21st century, obviously with the advent of digital media, things are very, very different today. These are three directly comparable examples to the previous ones. So the first one, fortunately this didn't end in any tragedy, so I can make a joke here, not so glamorous as the landing on the moon. This is a crash landing of a plane in the Hudson River. And this actually first came to the news' attention because there was someone who was tweeting about this. He saw this happen, and he was actually on the rescue boat. He took a photo and he said, crash landing in the Hudson River. He was there firsthand, sharing his firsthand account and experience before any journalist could get there. Again, if we look at protests around the world, the Arab Spring, Tahrir Square, even when the government was trying to shut down the internet, people were still sharing their experiences. And instead of one iconic, albeit very powerful photo that represents the entire struggle, you instead have an entire collection of a population's experiences through their words, through their photos, and through their videos of what's happening there. And then finally, in a very, very direct comparison, this third photo is from the inauguration of Pope Francis just last year. And you can see when compared to the previous inauguration, the sea of lights of smartphones, and even this person holding up a tablet taking a photo of the proceedings. And not just taking photos, but again, sharing their firsthand experiences. So what we're seeing here is a complete reversal in the way that information is shared. It's a complete reversal in who actually holds the power in sharing this information. And we see that journalists are actually reporting on things that they're observing on Twitter, not the other way around. Twitter is no longer the place just to consume this information. It's actually the place where the collective intelligence of the average citizen interprets this and together decides what these events mean to us. So, why does this happen? We know that technology enables this sort of behavior, but what is it about people that makes us want to take to technology and use it as a platform in this way? And to point to that, I'd like to share a quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's an astrophysicist. He was asked, what is the most remarkable thing about the universe? And here's his answer.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?
The most astounding fact.
The most astounding fact
is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high-mass ones among them, when unstable in their later years, they collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems. Stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars. There's a level of connectivity. That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you're a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are, just by being alive.
As you can see, I'm too connected. I have to have a timeout on my laptop to make me look away from it, so I'm going to exit out of that. All right. So obviously an amazing, very inspiring quote from him. The part about, the universe being a part of us and us being a part of the universe, but particularly the 3 points that he brings up at the end, which are the 3 things that all humans strive for, which is to feel connected, to feel relevant, and to feel like an active participant in the world. And these are the 3 things that give us a sense of universal connectivity. So what is Twitter's role in this? Well, Twitter as a platform can really be boiled down to 3 things. Twitter is live, it's public, and it's conversational. When we say that it's live, I mean that we literally watch events unfold on Twitter in real time. I'll give you guys an example. When the Boston Marathon bombing happened, I think it was 2 years ago, there was a police chase through the city of Boston into the wee hours of the night. And people were tweeting, what they were hearing outside their doors and outside their windows because nobody really knew what was going on. And I was up at 3 in the morning in San Francisco refreshing my Twitter feed, trying to find out what was happening in real time. It's public, which means that, you don't have to have a relationship with somebody to follow their content. And someone doesn't have to have a relationship with you in order to receive your content. As a result of this, tweets flow very freely. And things that are trending just rise up to the surface because there's no restriction on how that information is shared. And finally, Twitter is conversational. It allows us to have conversations and make connections with people that were before now impossible. And not only does it allow you to connect, it allows us to actually eavesdrop on conversations that others are having. It allows us to see world leaders interacting with each other. And I'll show you a few examples of brands interacting with each other later on as well. So through these 3 aspects, it becomes pretty clear that Twitter is, not just a technology platform, but it's a platform that is a reflection of the human experience in the sense that it reflects the moments that we all experience in our day-to-day lives. We often talk about Twitter as being a second screen. We typically mean that in the sense of it's a second screen to television. So when you're watching TV, you have your tablet or your phone up and you're scrolling through your Twitter feed at the same time. But in a more general sense, it's a second screen to our day-to-day lives as well. So just to talk a little bit about the scale, we've got 255 million active users. Notably, 77% of those are outside of the US, with about 25% in APAC. And we know people are viewing Twitter logged out as well, which means that they may not have signed up for an account, but they're visiting the website and they're seeing the content. And that makes up about 400 million unique users. Most importantly, the majority of our users are actually accessing Twitter via mobile, and we know that this is a reflection of broader trends in the entire industry. So the growth of mobile usage has really exploded. If you look at the last 3 years, we've seen a 14% increase in desktop internet usage. Compare that to an almost 600% increase in mobile online access. It's just an astounding number. Another astounding number, the average consumer actually unlocks their phone 110 times a day. Yeah, it's completely absurd. I kind of started reflecting on my own behavior a bit more after I heard about this, but I'm probably not bringing this number down very much. It's a completely different world. And not only are they using their phones and mobile more, as a result, they're spending more time online as a whole. So if you stack up smartphone usage and tablet usage, we've doubled our time online just in the past few years. And this graph really illustrates how that actually looks throughout the day. Not only are we spending more time online, you see that we're pretty much spending our entire day online. People wake up and they reach for their cell phones. I know I do. You grab your cell phone in the morning like it's your cup of coffee. You do it before you have your breakfast, before you go to the loo, before you say hi to your partner in the morning. It's an integrated part of our lives. And you can see from this graph the light blue line is mobile usage. It spikes in the early mornings during our commutes and again in the evenings. And then you see tablet usage coming in as well late at night before we go to sleep. So not only are people more connected than ever, they're connected pretty much at all points throughout the day. And because of this, the role of marketing has seen a change as well. Marketing traditionally has always talked about target markets, hence the term marketing, but people are now talking about brands not necessarily having target markets, but actually target moments. And how many moments are there? On Twitter, there are 1 billion tweets every 2 days, so 500 million tweets a day. And we think of that as 1 billion moments to engage with a captive audience and your customers themselves on Twitter. The VP of Sprint has actually said that what Twitter has is more important than just reach. They've captured the in-the-moment space, which is incredibly important to marketers. So just a bit more on that. Traditional marketing has a much longer cycle time than what people are expecting today. And you've really seen this change in recent years. So in the green, what you see is the traditional life cycle of a marketing campaign. And I have to give due credit to somebody from Intel who gave us this information. So this is a conceptual slide, but when you think about these big banner ads you see, you think about these big TV campaigns, those are typically spanning several months. But what's happening today is that marketers are actually touching their customers online on a daily basis or multiple times a day. And not just that, but consumers are actually expecting this kind of behavior. If they follow your brand on Twitter, they want to see content from you every day. They want to see photos every day. They want to see videos every day. And they want this to be relevant to what's happening in that time. So speaking of real-time marketing, people know that it's important. They know that it's reflective of new trends. But there are some discrepancies in how it's being used if you actually look at the data. So 76% of marketers say that they're using it today, 88% consider it important, but only some have actively budgeted it into their 2014 marketing plans. And on top of that, only 20% are actually tracking the ROI of these campaigns, which is a little bit crazy because ROI should be easiest to track in online, real-time, targeted marketing as opposed to, say, a brand campaign that you're running through a TV commercial. So we see still this gap between understanding that it needs to be done and using it effectively. This is based on a study from Evergage, which is a real-time marketing tool. They published a study called Real-Time Marketing for the Rest of Us, and they've shared some metrics around what people think about real-time marketing, how they interpret it. So people know that the channel is most effective on is social. They know that there are clear benefits. 80% have said that it increases customer engagement, 73% that it improves customer experience, and importantly, 60% that it actually improves conversions as well. However, there's still a lot of apprehension and there's a lot of fear around the obstacles and the resources needed to support this. So when asked, what do you need to make real-time marketing a reality, the things that are stopping people are a lack of resources, the time to implement these campaigns, and just knowledge and comfort about how to actually do this. So we've talked about there being billions of moments to engage, but now let's get into the how. So again, there's a gap between the opportunity here, which is all of this content and all of this scale, all of these people that are available and willing to receive information from brands, and the actual tactics of the implementation. So what I'm hoping to do today is to run through a framework that we share with our clients, along with several examples, to clarify that this isn't something that's only available to the huge brands with a ton of budget. This is something that everybody can do if they are a little bit creative, and most importantly, that they plan ahead. And we'll talk a bit about how to get around the unpredictability issue. So this is the matrix that we share with our clients to help them think about how to do real-time marketing effectively. So I'll talk about the axes briefly. On the top, you have predictable moments. So we have everyday moments. These are, mundane things that people are talking about on an everyday basis. We have connected moments. These are part of larger, predictable campaign activations that the brand is doing, and they're using Twitter to kind of tie the threads together. On the bottom half, we have unpredictable moments. So by reactive, I mean reacting to something that a customer of yours is posting on Twitter, or reacting to something that another brand is posting on Twitter. And unpredictable as well incorporates live events. So those really big events that we all know and love, like the World Cup, the Olympics. These don't come around that often, but when they do, they present a huge opportunities to brands to take advantage of them. And then to the left, you have always on. These are things that brands should and can be doing on a daily basis to make sure that they're covering these areas. And then towards the right are more of these one-off events. And when talking about the everyday section, I think it'll become very clear that real-time marketing is not just tied to live events. It's something that can be done on a daily basis. So with that, let's get into it. All right, so when we talk about everyday events, one key aspect of that is the predictability of these everyday events. And because we have so much volume, we have so many users, and we have so many tweets on Twitter, we're actually able to use that data to draw patterns about what people are doing in their day-to-day lives. So let's look at the volume of tweets of people talking about going for a run. So you can see that, Monday morning people wake up, they're not feeling particularly motivated. But in the rest of the week, in the mornings is when you really see a spike in conversation about this, and the evenings as well, when people are going home from work. So if you're a brand, let's say Nike, and you understand this pattern, you can actually take advantage of this, and depending on the timing of your content and how you're reaching your customers, reach them not just with the right content, but in the right moment. So here's a tweet from Nike. It's quite small, but if you look at the timestamp, it says 6:37 a.m. They're sending this out in the morning when they know people are about to go for their run. They're saying, Miles, eat them for breakfast, motivating these people before they leave. And because it's in real time, it's relevant, it's inspirational, and it has much more meaning to someone at this time of day versus if they're receiving this at noon when they're stuck at their office, at their desk, for example. And these types of campaigns, when we say organic, we mean free, basically. This is just Nike signing up for a Twitter account and tweeting at the right time. This doesn't require them to pay anything. If they want to amplify their message, though, they can take advantage of our promoted tweets. So what you see up there is a small yellow icon that indicates that this is promoted. So on Twitter, all the advertising is native, which means that it sits in line with the other content. It looks like the other content, but it's just amplified to users who typically wouldn't be following this brand. And here they're using paid distribution, again, still on the same everyday concept, which is running, and they're using a celebrity endorsement with Macklemore, who's a famous rapper in the US, to amplify this connection to running that they have. And another thing with everyday moments is that because people are talking about these moments every day, there are opportunities every day to engage directly with your customers. Nike kind of went above and beyond here, even though this didn't necessarily require too much time. And they respond to a user who tweets, had 60 miles, ran in August, let's make it 100 miles for September. Nike running, got my back. And Nike saying, we're ready, are you? And they kind of flip the tweet around in the photo they send out to him. They've actually customized a photo for him that says, I ran 60 miles in August, I'm going to crush 100 in September. So again, turning his question into motivation. Doesn't take too much time to do, doesn't take too many resources, it's just text on a photo, but it'll make that person feel incredibly special. All right, another pattern that we see is the word tired. As Tina said, arrived at midnight, kind of tired today. I haven't tweeted about this yet, but I might later. So yeah, we see people tweeting about being tired late at night, probably in the early afternoon after they've had their lunch. And what's interesting is that there really is a community of people on Twitter who talk about this. I mean, people on Twitter just talk about everything, and that's one of the most incredible things. I mean, there's great content, there's some not so great content, but you'll find communities around almost any topic. So this is a completely user-generated hashtag, and if you're not familiar with Twitter, A hashtag is basically something preceded by the pound sign. If you click on it, it links to all the other tweets that contain this hashtag. So it kind of categorizes all the tweets around a certain topic. Sometimes we refer to it as a digital campfire because it's the gathering of a lot of people who are interested in the same thing. So in this case, people are tweeting, why can't I sleep at night? So, when you're up late at night, you can't sleep, you're frustrated. I guess some people decide to grab for their phone and tweet about it. And you really see there's a lot of people talking about this. So if you're a brand and you see this and it's relevant to you, what do? And ZQuil actually did something very creative here. So I don't know if you are all familiar with NyQuil. It's a cold medicine that has a sleep-inducing effect, and I guess they realized that people were taking it just to go to sleep. So not so sure about the health implications of that, but they decided to just make a sleep aid as well as part of their brand, and instead of NyQuil, calling it ZQuil. And so here, again, you see the yellow promoted icon, and what they've done is actually promoted this tweet to everyone who is either engaging with this hashtag, talking about this hashtag, or tweeting with this hashtag. And they're saying, seriously guys, these tweets will still be here tomorrow, let's go to bed together. So again, catching relevant people and catching them at the right time. All right, so that's everyday moments. Hopefully it gives you a sense that these are things that are not too complicated to do and that there are many opportunities throughout the day to do them, even when it comes to mundane topics. Next, I want to talk about connected moments, which are larger campaign activations across multiple types of media that Twitter helps to bring together. When we walk through the examples, I think it'll become clearer what I mean. But when you have campaigns like this, you have a banner, you have a TV commercial, it's tough to get that one-to-one connection with your customer, and Twitter can be a good way to actually tie all that together. So Starbucks did a really creative integration with us. You'll see that in many of the examples I'm giving, it's reacting to natural things that consumers are already doing in their day-to-day lives. In this case, Starbucks had observed that there was this behavior where people are buying coffee for the person behind them in line. So there were a couple articles on this being pay it backwards. So you're buying coffee for someone behind you, or if you're in the US where we have Starbucks drive-thrus, which are a little excessive, buying it for someone behind you in the drive-thru line. So has this ever happened to you? The person in front of you in the drive-thru buys you a drink. It's called pay it backward, paying it backward, thank you Starbucks. So they kind of observed that this was happening and that there was this behavior around gifting, around appreciation, and around sharing that was happening around their brand. Now, this has never happened to me, but not that lucky. But I have had coworkers go out and buy me a coffee. I'm sure many of you have as well. It's a nice gesture and it's a common gesture, and they wanted to set up a campaign around it. So we worked with them, and here's what we did. Oh, before we get to that, to set up their campaign, I wanted to point out the motto they actually set for this, which doesn't say anything about coffee. It doesn't say anything about Starbucks. All it says is, if actions define us, let's be known for acts of kindness. So they're extending the meaning of their brand beyond just the product itself to what role that actually plays in our lives and what it means to us.
Know someone who deserves a Starbucks coffee? Now it's as simple as sending a tweet. Introducing Starbucks Tweet a Coffee, a cool new way to give the treat of Starbucks. Tweet Starbucks to your yoga teacher, your dog walker, or someone you follow but have never met. Use it to celebrate and reward the big and small things. Once you've linked your accounts, all you have to do is tweet @tweetacoffee to your recipient's Twitter handle. You can even include a short note. They'll receive a tweet with a link to a $5 Starbucks card e-gift that they can redeem right off their phone at participating stores. It's a new way to say, you're awesome, this Starbucks is on me. To get started, go to starbucks.com/tweetacoffee to connect your Starbucks and Twitter accounts. Then you're ready to go. Only from Starbucks and Twitter.
Yeah, so really cool integration they did with us here. And again, to kick off this campaign, they're just saying, smile at someone today. And you can see the level of engagement this has. Of course, this is due to the fact that Starbucks is an immensely popular brand as well. But, they're keeping it really simple in their message. And again, they're mimicking behavior that's already happening in real life to amplify their brand. Another example I'd like to give is Axe. So if you're not familiar with Axe, they are a men's cologne brand. And their commercials tend to be pretty cheeky. They're a little bit naughty, lots of girls in bikinis, that kind of thing. So I think they wanted to do a new campaign, add an additional level of meaning to their brand, and create a new reputation. So they launched this Peace is Coming campaign called Make Love, Not War, and had this commercial, which I really love, which I'll play now.
Mikael!
Make love, not war. With new Axe Peace.
So, I think they've elevated their brand a little bit, still ending on a pretty ridiculous note at the end there. But what's cool about this is, they talked about this commercial on Twitter, they shared the video on Twitter, that's kind of step one. But then they took it one step further. And they actually asked their users to tweet photos of them kissing with the hashtag #KissForPeace. This was launched on, I think it was like a Global Peace Day with a Peace One Day organization. And on this day, when they received photos from users, lucky users were chosen and their photo was actually displayed up in Times Square. So they're taking, again, this campaign which airs on TV, which airs as just a typical commercial, and really up-leveling it by engaging regular people. Here's an example of someone who tweeted with this hashtag, and their photo, as you can see at the bottom, was featured in Times Square. Now, something else that is really cool about this is that H&M actually launched their David Beckham underwear line at the same time. Ladies, don't get too distracted by this video. But yeah, as you can see, they're doing the same thing. They've got a huge video ad campaign. They've got a huge banner, as you're about to see, and they're tweeting about this video on Twitter. They're engaging with their users on Twitter. They're responding to users who are saying, I'm buying H&M underwear for my husband tomorrow. But one of the coolest things they did was actually respond to Axe as part of the Axe Same Peace One Day campaign that we previously saw. And they're tweeting at Axe, we're taking this commercial break to hashtag #KissForPeace, using Axe's hashtag and tweeting a photo of David and Victoria Beckham. So essentially hijacking Axe's hashtag and putting their own creative against it. But this is actually good for everybody. People love it when brands talk to each other on Twitter. There's nowhere else where you see that kind of behavior happening. Kind of takes a big corporation and makes them seem accessible, creative, funny, and people really, really love it. And this tweet got a ton of engagement. All right, so next I'll talk about live events, which are those big TV events, those big sporting events that we all know and love. This is one of my favorite examples. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Skywire, but this was a live airing of a man named Nick Wallenda, who comes from, I think, 7 generations of acrobats, tightrope walkers, stuntmen, and his stunt is walking tightropes across natural wonders of the world, and he does it without a net. So, because the world is the ridiculous world we live in today, he also decided to broadcast this live with a television crew. So the Discovery Channel aired this live. You can see the hashtag in the upper right-hand corner saying hashtag Skywire, inviting people to tweet along and follow along the event on Twitter. So I'm going to play the footage. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you hold your breath.
Thank you, Jesus, for this beautiful view.
How's that dust on there right now?
Oh, it's all right.
Okay.
Praise you, God. Praise you, Jesus.
Okay. I think I finally reached the point where I no longer sweat profusely when I see that video. So this was a huge event on Twitter. It was obviously a huge event on TV, but it also generated 1 million tweets on Twitter during the airing of the event. And we know that it was a real victory for people. It was a real demonstration of courage. And as Robert Flores of ESPN says, hashtag Skywire is a victory for courage, perseverance, and dad jeans. Making fun of the dorky jeans that Nick is wearing during the broadcast. So of course other people start jumping in. Seth Meyers, who is a famous American comedian, he came to fame on Saturday Night Live. He says, "Thank you, Jeanses," hashtag Skywire. So we know that Twitter's a great place for celebrities, for media personalities, but how does a company or a brand jump in on this? So if you're Lee Jeans, you see this and you say, "Denim, preferred by cowboys, rock stars, and at Nick Walinda," hashtag Skywire. So they were able to see this conversation kind of unfolding. They knew that this was a big live event, and they were able to jump in, again, with really just a couple of words, but witty words, to join in the conversation and engage their customers on Twitter who are participating in this event with the rest of the world. So to get back to some data, we know live events are big on Twitter. In fact, 66% of Twitter users watch live events, which is 11% higher than any other form of social media. And sporting events are especially big on Twitter. People really like to express their frustration, they like to express their exuberance, their celebrations on Twitter. They love to tweet about their reactions to games. So there's a ton of volume around big sporting events. 150 million tweets during the London 2012 Olympics, and that was 2 years ago. So on sporting events, some brands are hesitant to participate in those because, again, they can be hard to predict. What kind of creative do you put forward if you don't know if the match will end in a win or a loss? In this case, Adidas did something pretty ingenious. This was part of the Champions League match last year, 2013, and if you're a football fan, you know that Bayern Munich won. This is a photo of one of their star players, and Adidas actually sent this out before the game took place. They took an old photo of the player in defeat, and then another old photo of him celebrating a victory. Put those two together and tweeted, 12 months, one moment, all different. And even though they didn't know how the match was going to turn out, this tweet would have worked either way. And in it, they encapsulated the emotions around football, the sadness that comes with the loss and the celebration that comes with a victory. And this, of course, was seeing a ton of engagement as well. So they didn't need to know what was going to happen. They just had to be smart about figuring out what was at the core of what their consumers wanted to hear. And this event saw a ton of engagement, 6 million tweets on Twitter just during the airing. And because Adidas was able to send that tweet out, they were able to participate in that conversation. So I've talked about a lot of big brands so far. Heineken's not an exception, but I'll show you why this is a little bit different. If you're a brand like Adidas, you're probably an official sponsor of the teams, of the players. You probably have media rights to the TV airing. What can you do if you don't have those things, if you don't have those resources, if you're not a big name? So Vine is a 6-second video platform that's part of Twitter. It allows for really creative kind of stop-motion films. And Heineken here did something fun where they actually live tweeted replays of goals during a football game. So let's see what they So really fun, and this doesn't require a lot of money. You don't have to have the rights to anything. It looks like they built a miniature set, had some paint, most importantly had a couple of hands, and they were still able to participate in this even though they didn't have any of the official requirements. All right. Beyond sports, we know that general media live events on Twitter are huge as well. So 46 million people watched the Oscars this year. Of those, 39 million people were on Twitter. And of the tweets that were sent out, they were seen 3.3 billion times. So again, massive reach and massive scale. And these numbers just keep going up every single year. And if you've heard of the Oscars, you've probably heard of the famous Ellen DeGeneres tweet, where she took a selfie of herself and a ton of other celebrities. This is a video that shows how that tweet spread around the world, and it really illuminates that it's a global platform. It's not just isolated to the US, where the Oscars aired. Zooming in on Asia, you see that people are talking about it here as well. Another big media event, the Grammys. For those of you who don't know, these are like the Oscars, but for music in the States. 15.2 million tweets this year when it aired. And one of the funniest things that came out of this was the most retweeted tweet was around this guy Pharrell's hat. So Pharrell's a famous musician. You might have heard his hit song Happy this year. It's on every radio station. And he wore this completely absurd hat to the Grammys, which was like gigantic. And people had great reactions to it on Twitter. In particular, Arby's, who is a fast food sandwich brand, tweeted, "Hey Pharrell, can we have our hat back?" And just look at the engagement, almost 77,000 retweets of this. Arby's is known for roast beef sandwiches, not a very sexy brand, but they were able to inject themselves into the Grammys by figuring out a way to be creative about it. Pharrell replies, "Are y'all trying to start a roast beef?" Making fun of the fact that they have roast beef sandwiches and asking if they're trying to start a fight. And then Quaker Oats jumps in and says, "Hey Arby's, did Pharrell give you that hat back? Because I still haven't heard from Madonna about mine." So again, like I said, people love it when brands talk to each other, and especially when celebrities are a part of it as well on Twitter, because where else can this possibly happen? And again, Quaker Oats, Arby's, these are not big brands that people, wax poetic about. But they love this stuff, and when you're creative, it doesn't really matter what you're selling. All right, and speaking of live events, it doesn't just have to be a big sporting event or a big broadcast event. We see Twitter as being really effective in amplifying TV commercials as well. So brands who have messaging on TV are actually able to extend that, not by just sending out the same content as on Twitter, but by sending out, in this case, behind-the-scenes footage. Or in Holiday Inn's case, they had a commercial, and they send a link to the commercial, but include a photo of an actual hotel suite, so you get some additional context there. Or Jaguar, who had a TV spot, and tweets about a contest for users on Twitter to enter. So it's a great way, not just to, again, replicate the content you have elsewhere, but to amplify it, to be creative about it, to take it to the next level. On Twitter, we have a type of targeting called TV ad targeting, and it targets people who are talking about television shows or people who we reasonably believe have seen your commercial on TV, depending on what time it aired. And there really is a measurable impact when Twitter is used to amplify that TV advertising. Nielsen did a survey in which we found that there was a 95% stronger message association when that TV ad was amplified through Twitter, and a 58% higher purchase intent as well. So we've talked about everyday moments, we've talked about connected moments. Those are both part of the predictable space, things that can be measured and planned for, larger campaigns that are already in your plan, and just integrating Twitter as part of that. Now I want to talk about some of the more unpredictable moments. So reactive moments are when a brand is reacting to things that are happening on Twitter outside of their control, or when somebody is tweeting about that brand and they are being opportunistic about that chance. So here we see a user who's in the airport in Atlanta. She's saying, "Where can I find some bronzer, some surf spray, and a DKNY cozy in the Atlanta airport?" I've sent tweets like this before. You don't really expect a response. You're just, talking about expressing your frustration to the world and hoping somebody might see it. But in this case, DKNY actually responds, and luckily for them, they actually have a store in the Atlanta airport. And they send a link to the user of where that store is located. Half an hour later, she tweets back a photo of the actual sweater that she purchased from that very store. And DKNY says, amazing what can happen within 35 minutes of a tweet. Oops. So again, this doesn't require a lot of resources. This just requires someone who's paying attention to when the brand is being mentioned. And there are lots of tools available for this. There are ways that you can save searches. There are ways you can get notifications when your brand is being mentioned, for example. So it's just a matter of listening and paying attention and being ready to respond when that moment comes. Another example, again, a user who's kind of just tweeting something not particularly profound. Can tell I like chocolate a bit too much when I'm following both Kit Kat and Oreo. Ha 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 ha. So, in response to this, Kit Kat does something really above and beyond, and they say, "The fight for Laura's affections is on. Oreo, your move." And they tweet a tic-tac-toe grid with some Kit Kats in the middle. Oreo, who's really known as really ahead of the pack in this kind of marketing, responds and says, "Sorry, Kit Kat, we couldn't resist. Hashtag give Oreo a break." Having eaten the Kit Kat. So again, really fun. I'm sure this user didn't expect anything to come of a tweet like that, but instead she got some great brand engagement. So speaking of brands engaging with each other, I actually have another example from Kit Kat. I promise they're not paying me. Many of you have probably heard of the Red Bull sponsored space jump. This is when a man jumped from space. It was broadcast, it was sponsored by Red Bull, and again, huge event on Twitter. A lot of people were talking about it. And of course you have the Red Bull sponsored tweet of the athlete saying, "Thanks for being a part of my dream." Great. And then again, Kit Kat jumps in. And they're being, really cheeky about this. They don't have the sponsorship. They didn't even have to pay for someone to go into space. And still, they're taking advantage of this event. Authentic footage from Kit Kat's ascent to the edge of space. Live jump. So really fun and really smart. All right, so we've talked about these 4 different types of moments that can happen. Hopefully it becomes a little bit clearer that it's not just these big, daunting live events. You have everyday moments which happen on a daily basis, seemingly mundane topics that, as long as you understand the patterns of behavior, can be taken advantage of. We've got connected moments where Twitter is part of a larger campaign and serves as a way to not just amplify your message, but as a different way for you to engage with your audience. And reactive moments when you're responding to users mentioning your brand. And hopefully this clarifies, why moments are important, on Twitter in particular, what the role of real-time marketing is, and some concrete tactics for really how to take advantage of it and be scrappy and resourceful even if you don't have full access to the resources that you think you may need. So I'd just like to end with a short video of some of the most important moments on Twitter that have taken place in the past few years. Thank you.
For the presentation, we are also enjoying it. We just don't want it to end, to be honest. We have more time for this session. So, any questions? Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for this great presentation. I think everybody enjoyed it. And I have a quick question. What are the risks of this kind of real-time marketing? What if you made a wrong joke? And what do you know? What companies can do to mitigate that risk? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. We get that question a lot. So it's sort of interesting because the same platform where the risk happens is the same platform where the mitigation happens. So we've seen oftentimes when, not necessarily when someone makes a wrong joke on Twitter, but when there's some outside factor that's a negative influence on the brand, they take to Twitter to respond to that in a manner that's humorous or sensitive, and they use that as a way to kind of react to things. And I think the most important thing is just authenticity in the brand. So if something goes wrong, for example, brands that have really taken responsibility and said, you know, we apologize, we're sorry, etc., that is much more receptive than someone who is defensive. And again, it's the same medium where you can distribute that message widely.
Any other question?
For the rest of maybe dinosaurs that are joining me for this question, can you tell me the difference in power between retweets and followers? So that which has a greater impact on the brand? Does it matter if you follow, or is it better to get more tweets? And how do you build each one?
No, it doesn't. That's not an obvious. There's no obvious answer to that at all. You know, I think followers are your audience on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who have opted in to see your content, so they're going to be your strongest advocates. And the two are kind of related because generally they're going to be the ones who are retweeting your tweets to their followers and expanding that message. So it kind of depends on what the goal of your brand is. If the goal is to build loyalty with your existing customer base, then certainly engaging with your followers is extremely important. We see people tweeting things out to their specific followers, giving rewards to their existing customers on Twitter, for example. But if your goal is to get new customers, if your goal is just to extend the reach and awareness of your brand, then retweets are certainly the place where that happens. The one thing about followers that's good is that they have a lifetime value. It's not just a one-time thing like a retweet. Your followers are, once you acquire a follower, ideally they're your follower for a long time, and they continuously see your message. So, it's hard to kind of quantify one versus the other. I would say retweets have a bigger impact short term, but followers are more representative of loyalty over time.
How do you build that?
So I think it really comes down to the content and a lot of what we talked about today. So being relevant in real-time moments, finding those places where people you think are in your customer base are tweeting about things that they're interested in and that your brand is also interested in, and inserting yourself in those conversations. We, of course, also have advertising products that you can use to amplify your followers in that sense as well. But in terms of just acquiring followers organically or for free, I think it's just about having engaging content, and again, engaging content at the right time.
Hi, this is a question as a user of Twitter. I'm curious, being on the development team, what the model is for Twitter to protect the experience from becoming too saturated for users with sponsored tweets. And I know there has to be a fine balance there, and I'm curious how you manage that.
Yeah, great question. We actually have an entire engineering team dedicated to just that issue. So at Twitter, we're actually really concerned about user engagement. If you look at the amount of ads we serve relative to total tweets and compare that to competitors, it's actually much lower. And the team I'm referring to, they look at things like, if we increase the number of ads is user engagement decreasing? Are they dismissing these ads? Are they not engaging with them? And they really balance that. It's a very metrics-driven approach. Beyond just the numbers and technical factor, I think just the ad formats themselves really lend themselves well to not being too spammy. Everything is native, so when you see a promoted tweet, it looks like a regular tweet. And our targeting has also evolved a lot over time to where you can really reach an audience that is most likely to be interested in what you have to say. So I'm probably not going to have a brand targeting me with ads that I have no interest in because they know that I'm not going to be clicking on them or interested in them.
Thank you for sharing the insights. There are lots of interesting information, and it opens up a new world of branding. You shared quite a lot of examples on brands, consumer brands, on how to use Twitter. I was wondering, what would be your demographics or profiles of the Twitter crowd in terms of age, sex, different of preferences. Can you share that with us, please?
Yeah, it actually varies a lot by market. Users behave very differently on Twitter depending on where they are. So in Brazil, for example, it's mostly a consumption. It's mostly used for consumption, so people are following it for news. In Spanish-speaking Latin America, they're tweeting a ton. They really like to share what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. In Japan, people don't share their real names on Twitter. It's a fully anonymous service because it's one of the only places you can do that, and that's something that's really important to that culture. So it really... Well, Twitter's blocked in China, so the demographic in China is non-existent. Hong Kong, frankly, I don't have the data to know. But I think one thing that's great is that because there is so much scale, you will definitely have higher demographics in one specific area, maybe one specific age group, but because of just the volume of numbers, there's pretty good distribution across the board.
But I would suppose that those very young people, like, teenagers and 20s and 30s are still the dominant crowd in Twitter's group, right?
I'm hesitant to say yes because I just don't have the data to know.
What would be your bet?
Excuse me?
What would be your guess?
My guess is it's predominantly a younger crowd, similar to most apps and social media platforms. Yeah.
Thank you. Very enjoyable presentation. I have a question about brands. Kit Kat, Oreo, Quaker, and Arby's are well known. Do you have any examples of using Twitter to create a new brand? A startup company wanting to launch, wanting to be the future, Oreo or Arby's or Quaker.
Yeah. Has anyone here heard of Bonobos? Okay, great. So I'm going to call them a startup because no one's heard of them. So Bonobos, they sell pants. They sell very colorful pants. Their target is like younger, hip men. It's a fully online retailer. There's no in-store shops. They're becoming more and more well-known in the US, but a few years ago when they were just starting out, they had this huge campaign where we call it Flock to Unlock. So they say something like, if you retweet this 60 times, we'll give you a 60% discount on these pants. Or if we get 60 people to retweet, we'll give a 60% discount. So they get people to really engage that way because the more they do, they get a very clear benefit from it. And they actually saw a huge lift in sales on their website. I don't know if we can fully attribute the entire growth of their branding to Twitter, but in that particular campaign, they were extremely successful and people hadn't really heard of them before that.
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering what kind of developments do you see for the coming time for Twitter? So new big trends maybe. And also, how do you see the future of growth of Twitter? Because I heard that it's stagnating a bit. So I was wondering, how do you see that?
So in terms of future developments, I'll talk specifically about the business side because that's the side I'm most involved with. But there is an increased focus on direct response. So instead of a lot of these big branding messages we see, we're launching more and more advertising products that are geared towards really measuring very accurately the ROI of a campaign, driving people to your website to purchase something, commerce, for example, and we recently announced this at South by Southwest. We actually want to build commerce directly into the Twitter product, and not just use it as a brand marketing platform, but as a direct response, place where people can actually go to buy things or go to other websites where they can buy things. So that's from the advertising perspective. In terms of user growth, I think international markets are really going to be the huge driver of that. Asia in particular, we just see really interesting user behavior here that we don't necessarily see in the US. So in Japan, for example, we've got more users than Facebook. In Indonesia, we have a hugely engaged user base. So I think, really understanding what's driving some of that behavior in these markets and taking those globally will make a huge difference.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you, the most traffic of Twitters is on the morning time hours. Will the employers like this fact in future?
Are you asking why is Twitter used most in...
No, why. The fact is the most traffic of Twitter traffic is on the morning hours. The most traffic. In the night is low. Will the employers like this fact in future?
I don't think that's actually true. I don't know if you're referring to a specific graph that I shared, but those were around specific terms that people were tweeting about. So for example, people tweet about running more in the morning. This is actual tweets that they're sending out, not just them logging in and viewing tweets on Twitter. I don't have the information off the top of my head for how logins and usage is distributed throughout the day. We see different patterns in when people are talking about specific things that mirror their daily behavior, but that doesn't translate to usage of the platform overall.
Lisa, thank you. This is really a wonderful tour through the positive side of Twitter. Could you comment a little bit on the civil society use of Twitter? For example, there were several arrests in New York City several months ago of gang members, and the arrests were part of a team within the New York City Police Department that tracks social media use. Does Twitter have any corporate policy or any position on that kind of use for its platforms?
That's really interesting. I didn't actually know about that. Okay. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I don't think we have any particular policies for how the data is used. I think as long as the data is available, it can be interpreted as people wish. I know that we have some specific integrations around sort of that civil use cases. There's one where you can send out like a red alert via Twitter if there's a missing child, for example. There are certain instances when, in the events of a natural disaster, you can receive SMS alerts as opposed to having to have access to the internet and following your Twitter feed about things that are happening. We don't have specific policies, but we know that Twitter is being used that way, and I think it's widely encouraged.
If I have an advertising budget and I'm looking at a mix of media to use, and I use more Twitter, what am I using less of? What is Twitter? More Twitter means I'm using less of what other media, as an example?
I think that depends. So, it could be less of your, it depends on if you're talking about just kind of like digital or social advertising or your marketing budget as a whole. So it could be less of, other traditional advertising means such as print, TV, or if you're talking about more direct competitors, Facebook is obviously one that offers very similar advertising products to ours. So in that sense, that's probably the most direct competitor where you're taking budget out of. But we like to think of Twitter not just in that space, but really amplifying other types of media as well. So like some of the TV examples I gave today.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question about followers. Do you have a sense that if people follow a brand, does Twitter then become their dominant source of information about that brand?
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would assume so. Just thinking about my own personal behavior, I don't know where else I would get that kind of information. You receive their broadcast information elsewhere, certainly, but in terms of that day-to-day engagement and conversation, Twitter is the only place for it. I know there are other social media sites where, similarly, you can like a brand or subscribe to a brand and get their updates as well. So I hesitate to say that it's the only source, but it's definitely the most real-time source.
Sorry, I would like to ask, there are a lot of, what's the Twitter's competitive advantages? For example, a lot of social media try to be localized. For example, like in mainland China or in Russia. And what's the competitive advantages of Twitter in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the most distinguishing aspects is the real-time and public aspect. I think you might be referring to some of the messaging apps. We know there are a ton of them, especially in this region. Those definitely are very strong in the conversational sphere, but they're not public and they're not real-time. And those things are, the combination of those three things are actually truly unique to Twitter. I can't think of any other platform that has those. So in that sense, it's not just limited to your interactions with people you know. It's a way for you to connect outside of that with events that are going on in the entire world and to have visibility into what's happening in the world around you besides just your private social sphere.
Right. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think we should draw it to a close. Should we be staying with her for a little while so you can stay online and ask any questions? Thank you very much. We have a gift from CCI for you.